Rick Brusuelas, Joe Carlton, and I are the hosts of the Thursday Night Checkdown. And tonight, we've got cooked up a great show. Our guest tonight is Wyatt Bertolone, one of the very best football analysts and one of the most accurate rankers in fantasy football. In addition, Wyatt is a gourmet chef. So along with great information on his current dynasty rankings and the process he goes through to develop the rankings, hopefully Wyatt will not only share his recipe for fantasy football success, but also a delicious recipe or two. So, hi, Wyatt. What's cooking?
Not much. How's it going? Thanks for having me.
How's it going? Pleasure to have you, Wyatt. So why don't you tell us about yourself and how you got into fantasy football?
Sure. So I was kind of raised on fantasy football, honestly. My father has been playing it for over 30 years. So I kind of grew up rooting for his players, and we've always been into sports a good amount, especially football. So when I was 14, first started playing fantasy football. It was, I believe, it was the playoffs of the 2001 season, where the Rams were taken down by the Patriots in the Super Bowl. My uncle set up a fantasy league for just like me and my cousins. We played in that, so that was the first taste of having my own team, and have been playing ever since. My uncle and my father, the league that they're in has been going now. It's going to be going on its 35th year. I've been in it now for 11. Yeah, I've been in it now for 11 years. It's highly competitive. It's awesome.
Sure.
It's easily the best league I'm in. We draft in person every single year. We have a league party at the end of the year every year. There's a big, massive trophy for the winners. It's great. But yeah, I mean, I've been doing fantasy football for so long now. Like many other people during the pandemic, I got into content creation. It was more or less just like a way, somewhere to put thoughts. Starting out, I didn't really know what was going to happen with it or how far it would go. It was just, I love talking about fantasy football, and I wanted to continue to do that in a more public manner and learn to be a better fantasy player from talking to other people. And it's kind of just come to this.
Nice. So speaking of family, and why don't you give us a little bit of background, where you live, you have kids, family, all that stuff.
Yeah, I live in the Akron, Ohio area, married, one kid. Family's always been big to me. We were talking before the show. That's how I got into cooking, is Sundays and Thursdays at my grandmother's growing up every week, stepping in the door and smelling the meatballs frying. That family atmosphere. Yeah. That family atmosphere is what got me into cooking to begin with, is just because it's what brings people, that it can bring people together, that it creates memories and create, good feelings in people just in general.
Yep.
That's what really propelled me into wanting to cook.
Nice. That makes me think of my mom, because same thing for me. That she was all about having family over, everybody eating her food. Yeah, definitely. I understand where that comes from, for sure.
Yeah, if there's any way that I can show like my love for somebody in the greatest way, it's by cooking. Like that's. But whenever I go to places or get-togethers with friends or family or anything like that, and
the Fantasy Football Expo.
Yeah, I basically always offer to cook. People thank me and say, "You don't have to do this," and it's literally y'all don't understand. Like, I want to do this. Like, this is fine by me.
Awesome. Will you be attending the expo this year?
Of course, I don't miss it. I mean, I'm 20 minutes away from the expo.
That's true. That's right. You said Ohio.
So it's pretty hard
for me
to miss it.
Of course you're going. Of course you're going.
Yeah,
that was a
it's also like the greatest event ever. Yep. It's so much fun. Nice. Everyone's just there to have a good time, and that's exactly what it is.
I'll be going for my first time this year. Me and my wife, we're leaving the kids behind, and we're coming to have a good time.
Oh boy! All right.
Nice. All right. So, how long have you been a fantasy analyst, And at what point did you realize you knew that you were going to get involved in the industry and, share your knowledge?
Yeah, so it was 2020, right when the pandemic first hit, and everyone was indoors. So it was when I first actually started to try and make any content. But like I said, I wasn't really sure that where it was actually going to go, other than I just wanted to try and make some content, and I didn't know what it was going to be. After doing it for not very long, I knew I wanted to be doing it all the time because I enjoy it. I like talking about fantasy football, just in general, and I think the process of doing it makes me a better fantasy football player ultimately.
100%. I agree.
Yes, especially
Yeah.
talking to other people, and getting different perspectives. And like at the end of the day, that's what it's about because, well, I mean, like most of us, I have some money involved, I'd like to make it a good, return on my investment. So selfishly, that's a big reason for it.
You want the hard work to pay off 100%.
Right. With that said, the best feeling is when someone else comes to me and says that I helped them, win or whatever, that's honestly a better feeling than winning yourself in a lot of ways. The money's great when you do win something for yourself, but it doesn't beat the feeling of someone else benefiting from your help,
Yeah, I understand. I get a lot of text messages on Tuesdays and Sunday mornings myself.
Yeah, the phones always go on Sundays for sure.
And then I probably should have asked you sooner, but who am I starting here?
I know it's always 12:30. I'm in the middle of setting my lineups. I gotta stop to help you set yours.
I know. I get it. It's actually a great feeling. You're right.
Yeah. Do you have a rule though? I have a rule that says that I'm not going to touch my lineup, unless I know for a fact that there's an injury or a player not starting, and of course, then I'll try to make that sort of a switch. But I always find it dangerous to start going the back and forth between two players, not knowing which one to start.
Yeah.
And I always figure that if I change at the last minute, that's the wrong one. So
yeah, that's a tough one. I think every single fantasy football player has struggled with for a period of time, if not all the time. And we all kind of have to have our ways of dealing with it. And I like having a straight up rule, you don't touch your lineup after a certain point. I think is a good rule if you need it.
Yeah, definitely.
I don't know about y'all, and I'm sure there's plenty of other people like me. In fact, I know there's plenty of other people like me. I'm normally in somewhere in between 20 to 25 leagues every year. So there's a process to that, right, of setting that many lineups. So there's kind of a schedule throughout the week. So last minute, I've usually already gone through each lineup multiple times. So with the point of that being on Sunday is just a quick check. Is this still what I want?
Right.
I've already thought about those decisions, and so I usually don't tinker much on Sundays just because I've already put the work in.
Right.
And I've learned to not tinker because of that.
You start right on Tuesday and Wednesday for the you know which lineups are pretty much cemented all the way through with the exception of the flex spot.
Yeah, I know it works
as long as there's no injuries, then it's yep, that lineup's good. Then you could focus on what you I do the same thing.
I know what it works for me is Tuesdays when you're putting in waiver claims is when I also set a first lineup for each team while I'm already in that league. Just as a, this is what I think it's going to be. And then once waivers run, if I go through each team, because a lot of times, those waiver runs might include a player that I was intending to start. So then, it's another quick pass. Then there's usually the Thursday pass because there's Thursday games coming. And that's just a quick, all right, did I miss anything for Thursday night? And then there's a Saturday pass normally, again, just to heading into Sunday, okay, let's get this solidified, finished. And then the Sunday is just, okay, injuries have come in. What needs to be changed? Do I actually have to change anything? Was there any information that came out between Saturday to Sunday? Because, there's always the Schefter bombs, Sunday morning, and that can change some things that you go, okay, let me go check if that matters anywhere. But yeah, I tend not to tinker much because of that process throughout the week. I'm definitely guilty of it. Trust me. I mean, I know for a fact in that big league I was talking about with my family, that's been going on for over 30 years and it's expensive. I tinkered at in the last week of the season and cost myself some money. All because, and I think that one was like the pressure got to me on that one. Like it was a lot of money was on the line. I messed up.
Family bragging rights, all the
yeah. Addition to the money, it's a big deal. It's a lot of bragging rights in that one for sure. It definitely got to me on that week. So it happens to everyone.
You mentioned Thursday nights, and I was going to jump in with just a question. It's one of these things that's also like I don't know, not a tradition as much of a, like a fear of mine is starting players that play on Thursday nights. It always seems that, in fact, I hate Thursday nights. I guess I'll tweet it out almost every week where I hate Thursday nights because generally the players short week, higher risk of injury. It seems, I know they show stats that say that doesn't really happen, but it always seems that it happens to my teams. And then also you have that whole, boy, if you don't get a good score or your opponent gets a big score, you have Friday and Saturday going into Sunday where you're just like in turmoil. You're hating life. It's bugged you the whole, next couple of days. Yeah. How do you handle Thursday night games?
Well, I do think like the Thursday night football being bad is more anecdotal than like anything. I think it's just because it's it's an island game. So when it's bad, everyone remembers it, right? Mm-hmm. That's just a thing in life, right? When something's bad, you're more likely to remember than when something's good. When something's bad, you're more likely to tell a bunch of people that it was bad than you were more likely, But I mean, Thursday night's the only really rule I have, and it's related to all primetime games, is like divisional primetime games never go the way you think they're going to, because those teams know each other so well. Mm-hmm. They're more likely to go differently than you would think anyway, just because they play each other so differently and so hard that it affects my process just a little bit, where I probably think about my start sits a little bit more if it's borderline and they're playing in a primetime divisional game for that reason. Still start your studs. I think that's a tried and true thing that I hold to more often than not, is you start your studs. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that is something that I think is pretty true, in that those primetime divisional games really have a way of going crazy sometimes and not going the way you'd expect.
And I don't know if we asked it. You mentioned you're in Akron, Ohio. I recall. Do you have a favorite team?
Unfortunately, I'm a Browns fan.
Nice. I'm good friends with a Browns fan, actually. I don't know if you know Mike Zanda.
I'm sure. I believe I've seen that name a few times across Twitter.
He's a fellow high stakes player. He's very good. We chat. He takes like all the way till the summertime off, but then he gets into it. You see him post all kinds of chats, colorful chats, and with numbers and metrics and stuff.
Yep.
He's also a Browns fan, so this is good. That's two. I now know two Browns fans personally. It's great.
I'm sure that it's getting harder and harder to be a Browns fan. They're always terrible. They always give you a reason to hate the team. But unfortunately, I don't really have the ability, I don't think, inside me to actually change fandom. I just can't do it.
Yeah, so, and it's hard.
Why change now? You've been
right. Yeah, I've already put in the work. I deserve something from them eventually.
And again, things. You're a Browns fan. What are your thoughts on the season coming up? What sort of moves are you expecting, or maybe even hoping for?
I think it's gonna be pretty terrible in 2025. I'm expecting a bad year, pretty easily. Sounds like the plan is, Deshaun Watson will be on IR that whole time. Hopefully, never play another snap for the Browns again. I think it's very likely they sign Kirk Cousins, regardless of what they're planning to do in the draft, because they can sign him for essentially no money, like what Russell Wilson did with the Steelers. And Cousins has familiarity with Kevin Stefanski, so it just kind of makes sense. If they need a veteran in the room, no matter what, because they don't have anything right now, really. I think there's a good chance they draft a quarterback. I don't know if they do it in the first or not. I don't think
if they sign Cousins.
Yeah, I mean, like those two things are a little bit conflicting, right? If you sign
Mhm.
Cousins and then draft a first-round rookie,
I
because if you
mean-
draft a rookie that highly, they've got to start. They have to start
Yeah.
right away. And then you're asking Kirk Cousins to sign a deal to be a backup, which we're positive he does not want to do.
Yeah,
He
he
just
just
came
did
from
that.
Atlanta,
He just
so
did that. Yeah, he just
Yeah,
did that.
we know he's trying to get a starting job. So I think if they do sign Kirk Cousins, which, like I said, I think is likely, they're more likely to draft a quarterback, just like a dart throw later on in the draft. But I would expect them to, take multiple bites at the apple
And
this
if they
offseason.
do get Cousins, and again, it seemed like his first couple of games during last season were actually pretty decent. And then I think what I've heard is that there was a injury that he didn't talk about or that wasn't reported well, and it seemed that that's when things started to go down for him in
Yeah,
Atlanta.
he had an elbow injury.
He's at that age at apex where he might just be on the going down.
Yeah, he had a elbow injury he was on the injury report for 1 week, but only the 1 week. And I think they asked Terry Fontenot about it, and he made a comment that basically he was on the the injury report 1 week. I don't know.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because, I mean, put yourself in Kirk Cousins' shoe. You hurt your elbow. If you stop if you sit out a week, you're probably not playing again. So I imagine if you're him, you're also probably downplaying the elbow injury. So I don't think we'll ever really know how bad that injury actually was for him last year. I thought there was a point in the season where he was in a rhythm and he was looking all right. I don't know how much of that's left, just because he wasn't mobile to begin with, coming off the Achilles. You expect him to be healthier, but I mean, tearing your Achilles that late in your career, I'm sure any mobility he had is absolutely gone at this point. So I'm sure it's still going to affect him even into this year. I'm sure he's still a top 20 QB in the NFL at this point, but QB 19 doesn't do a whole lot for an NFL team. That keeps you in purgatory at best.
And he's a likable quarterback, and for a team that is faced with a lot of money going to a quarterback that's not likable, that's got to be an attractive alternative.
Yeah, and I saw JC saying it sounds like the Falcons are going to want to pay his bonus and keep him, and then it makes sense from the Falcons' perspective to try and keep him because they obviously value having multiple QBs on the roster that they can count on. So I'm sure that they would like to keep Kirk Cousins around. My guess is that Kirk Cousins is going to tell him, "I'm out of here."
Yeah, he's probably going to go look for an opportunity to start somewhere.
Yeah.
Well, Wyatt, so what do we make of the running back room for fantasy football purposes? I mean, I have always liked Jerome Ford. What's your thoughts on the running back room?
Yeah, so it sounds like Chubb's going to be walking. I don't think they're going to keep him around. Maybe if Chubb is willing to sign a very, very low amount of money, they might keep him around. But honestly, what does he do for them? It's not really in their interest to keep Chubb around. Unfortunately, at this point, he came back quick for them from that injury, but he didn't look anything like himself. That knee injury probably was the beginning of the end for Chubb's career. Unfortunately, I hate to see it because Chubb was one of my all-time favorite players. But I definitely think Jerome Ford is in line for a good workload. I expect them to add somebody. There's no reason for them not to. It's a great running back class. They've got some draft capital. I'm sure they're going to add somebody. It's just a matter of who they add to pair with Jerome Ford, because it could be Jerome Ford goes back into being the 1B in the offense, playing a little bit more passing downs, kind of mixing in on some running plays, or they could find something to pair with him so it's similar to the way it was last year when Chubb was not healthy, or even at the end of the year when Chubb got hurt again and Ford was playing a lot. I definitely love Jerome Ford's price. If you're looking at best ball right now on Underdog, he goes in the 140s. I think it's a fantastic bet because even if they add somebody, it's still an okay price. Because absolute worst case scenario is he's a handcuff this year, and you would pay that price for the best handcuffs in the league, and that's what Jerome Ford is one of the better handcuffs in the league because we know he can handle a big workload. He's a good pass catching back, all those things. Best case scenario is they draft somebody to be his backup, and he just he has a large workload and he's a massive value. Median outcome is that they draft someone to be a 1A, 1B with him, and he's, gets a few targets a game and 10 carries a game, and that's probably still just okay for that price, right? So, like, I think he's a great price right now.
All right.
And this is a draft that's thought to be pretty deep in the running back position. So, perhaps taking a running back a little bit later, but one who could conceivably carry a bigger share of the workload seems to be at least more viable. Not knowing anything about any of the other positions that they're in major need, but again, I think a Cousins-led team is one that's going to be more competitive. They're in a tough division, so I don't know if they will be competitive, but they'll be more competitive. So, and again, everybody wants all the teams to do well. I mean, no one likes to see a team languish. So hopefully this will be an opportunity for them to start making some moves in a more positive direction.
Yeah, and if you really think about it, like, the Browns have no business signing Kirk Cousins because, like I said, it's just going to put them in purgatory, which really does nothing for the team. But what will always be true, and what a lot of fans and fantasy analysts don't want to hear, is that teams care about winning. Like, the owners want to win, coaches want to win, the GM wants to win, the players want to win, the fans want to see a winning product. Like, the NFL teams do not tear it down and just tank. The Browns did it a while back, actually, did it pretty effectively. To accumulate a bunch of draft picks and lose a bunch of games. But most teams are not willing to do that.
Would you be opposed to Joe Milton if they traded like a second or a third round pick for him?
Oh, I would be very opposed if they traded a second or third round pick for Joe Milton.
Okay. I like him. I think he should get a chance somewhere. But
I think that there's a chance that Joe Milton can play in the NFL to a degree. He obviously has a massive arm and he's mobile. It's pretty inaccurate, though.
Yeah,
like, really inaccurate.
Yeah, over time, you only got to see him for one game. So
so he obviously needs some work.
Yeah.
If the Patriots were willing to take a 6th round pick or something like that for Joe Milton,
probably,
sure.
yeah,
but like any real draft capital, I think it would be a mistake trading for Joe Milton when we really don't know that much about him.
All right, so let's move on. We got a couple more questions before we get into your rankings. So who do you currently do content for? Who do you write for? What do you podcasting for? You can tell us about that.
Yeah, sure. So I'm co-owner of JWE Fantasy Football. The majority of my content goes through there. I do best ball streams. I do dynasty shows during the season. I do some redraft shows and some redraft shows leading up to the season. And we do rankings, and we have a Patreon for some bonus content for like roster reviews and that kind of thing. And then I also write for Dynasty League Football. I have, during the offseason, I have an article that comes out every week. That's a positional buy, sell, hold article. And then during the season, I have an article that comes out twice a month, looking at just dynasty trades in general. And then my redraft rankings and dynasty rankings are also through Fantasy Pros, and I enter their ECR contest every year.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay. All right. So, how long have you been playing? How long have you been in Scott Fish?
Yeah. So first one was Scott Fish Bowl 11, which that was, what was that? 2020? Was that 2020 or 2000? Okay. I think that's right. Yeah. I had no idea what it was until I hit Twitter and started Scott Fish Bowl. What's this Scott Fish Bowl? Found out it was for charity. Found out it was a massive tournament for charity. And I was like, okay, a couple of my favorite things, this sounds great. And I was instantly all about it and tried to get in. Luckily got in the first year I was trying, and have been in since.
Have you done live drafts at all?
Every year that they've had live, I've been at a live draft, which is awesome. This year I want to try to go to multiple places.
Nice.
It's just the best, man. The Scott Fish Bowl in general is the best thing that the fantasy community does, just in general, period. The amount of money it raises for all different types of charities is just fantastic. It brings out the best in the community. The live drafts are beyond awesome. They're so much fun. The live drafts only fail in comparison to the expo, because the expo is multiple days, whereas the the live drafts are just one day. But it's basically that, just while you're drafting, and it's so much fun. Being able to participate in the podathon every year now has been awesome too. It's just I love the event in general. I think it's fantastic.
I was also, my first Scott Fish was Scott Fish Bowl 11. Well, do you remember what your music team was?
Yeah, it was in the Childish Gambino division.
Ah, good. Yeah, I was in Johnny Cash. So
That's a good choice.
Nice. Yeah, I missed
And-
that one. I wasn't in until 13.
Okay.
And we'd be remiss to not point out also that you do specialized rankings just for the Scott Fish Bowl. Can you tell us a little bit about that and some of the process you go through that makes that unique and more useful?
Sure. So every year I make my own projections. It's kind of where everything I do fantasy wise is based off of those projections. They go into my rankings. It's how I work off for everything. But so the first year I was in Scott Fish Bowl, they had unique scoring. So I decided, well, I'm going to try and plug this scoring into my projections. It was a little bit difficult the first year because of the unique scoring and the scoring per first down. And I ended up doing a bunch of research to try and figure out about, on average, how often a player gets a first down based on their touch, so that I could try and project first down points for different players. And ended up coming up with a formula to spit out Scott Fish Bowl projected points based on my projections. So I put those out that first year. Got a good amount of buzz. I used them. I had some people let me know that they used them as well and had some success. And it's like, okay, well, this is something I'm just going to try and do every year. So then the next year and every year since, I've made sure that my projections, my initial run of projections for all teams are done before Scott Fish actually announces whatever the scoring is. So that the day that the scoring gets released, I can go into my spreadsheets, update all the formulas, and spit out those projections again. And so I can post them as quickly as possible. I've started making sure I can do it the same day because, to my knowledge, no one else is really putting that out at this point. And I'm waiting for the day to someone to steal my thunder. So I'm trying to make sure that I always have them out the day of, so that at least I'm first every year. And since starting doing them, the more and more people have been letting me know that they get used. I know people have said they get passed around in people's pick chats and stuff like that, which is super cool. Beyond awesome that people took that and ran with it. I feel immense amount of.
It'd be nicer if they subscribe to it, though. As someone who's since Super Bowl 11.
Well, the first year I released it, I even said, in the name of charity, I'm just putting this out in the world. I don't want anything from this. I don't need anything from anybody. I'm just doing it because I think it's in the proper spirit of Scott Fish Bowl. So I've just always done it ever since. I have had a few people reach out to me and ask for my favorite charities because they wanted to donate for me doing that, which is if you're going to try and thank me in any way, that would be the best way to do it, because that's what Scott Fish Bowl is about, right?
It is.
So yeah, but knowing that anybody uses them and finds any success from them is awesome, and I really appreciate everybody who does.
Well, they are wonderful. As I said, I've used them for the last, since Scott Fish Bowl 11, and it's super helpful, especially as I was a new player, to help me try to gain an edge on my, team's fellow players in my league, and then also in, the larger group too. And I've had luck, so getting into playoffs pretty regularly, and
love to hear it.
Yeah.
2 for 2. I'm 2 for 2. What are you two? You getting what you
yeah, I've never been able to get past the top 500. So I guess that's the second to the last round, or maybe third to the last round of the playoffs. But I've always been pretty fortunate.
Third week is the furthest I've went. Yeah.
My favorite is that last year for the Cincinnati Live Draft, the night before the draft, they had a person drop out, and John Bosch, who runs it, asked, does anybody have a friend? And I just so happen to be like, a friend of mine lives just outside of Cincinnati. I go and stay with him for that weekend for the live draft. So he plays fantasy football. He's only been doing it a couple years. I text him, hey, if you want this last spot, I can get you in right now.
Nice.
He does. He just goes. He knows nothing about Scott Fishbowl.
He has to go. He has to go. Yeah.
He knows nothing about Scott Fishbowl. Everything's new to him, with all this unique stuff. I gave him like the rundown, the night before, and give him my projections, and he made it further than me in Scott Fishbowl.
Nice.
I was like, yes.
And again, I did the live draft in Houston, and of course, we had an uninvited guest join the draft at the very end, Hurricane Barrel. So we had we were fortunate. We got through round 16, or I think it was round 16, where we were forced to stop and then bail out of the location, which was the Spindle Tap Brewery in Houston, and hightail it out of there before the hurricane hit. But it was an exciting time. So,
go ahead, Rick.
Oh, I guess we're
take
about
us right into the rankings.
Yeah, we're gonna and Joe and I are gonna pepper you with questions. Speaking,
Rick is. This is
no. We'll both pepper.
I have a few. I'll chime in when I think I'm ready to chime in.
I just wanted to get one more bad cooking pun in there. The peppering with questions. So, and in fact, and so folks know, Wyatt was really kind and provided us with his most current dynasty rankings. So we'll actually get a chance to share those if I can figure that out again. And actually, I need to do one more thing over here.
It's a top 12, right, Rick? It's a top 12.
Yeah.
Top 12 at each position.
Yeah, top 12 for a quarterback to begin. And sorry about the graphics work. I'm not a professional graphics artist, but
pretty good to me.
We'll go ahead and we'll kind of go. Obviously, Josh Allen in Dynasty is the top quarterback, although I guess Lamar Jackson and now Jaden Daniels are probably competing or will compete for that top spot. This list looks like a pretty exciting list. Is there anyone that kind of stands out for you as a quarterback that you think is uniquely high or low in your listing?
Compared to the market, I'm probably a little bit high on Patrick Mahomes. Just everyone's gotten pretty low on him recently. I mean, with good reason. Don't get me wrong. I kind of still just have him up there because this is going to be a little bit narrative driven. On top of him just being, he's the best quarterback we currently have in the NFL. I don't think there's really any debate about that. I kind of think this next year the Chiefs are going to try and put up a bunch of points again and not play as conservatively as they have the last couple of years. They kind of barely got by for most of the season. And I think they know that. Like, there's no way that they don't know that. And they are more concerned about getting to the playoffs and then we'll make it work through the playoffs. And while that did end up getting them to the Super Bowl, luckily, boy, did that, really come crashing down on them in the Super Bowl when they just could not move the ball against the Eagles. And granted, the Eagles have a really good defense, but it's not like the Chiefs didn't play some bad defense or some really good defenses throughout the year. I really think they're going to get back after it this year and try and put up some points and know that they have to have that offense humming throughout the year going into the playoffs if they want a chance at winning the Super Bowl again.
Yeah, I'll have to agree with you. In fact, Joe and I had a short that we did discussing Patrick Mahomes. I
redraft,
think I was a little
it was 2025 redraft, not dynasty though.
Yeah. But we're still, I mean, again, I think that we're still, perhaps not in, I'm a little bit more optimistic or a little bit more positive about Mahomes. I think, again, his last 9 games of the past season were when he really started to step up. I also think that, and we just heard that Travis Kelce is coming back. So I think that's another weapon. And depending on Rashee Rice, if he's going to be, one, physically able to play, and then two, suspension able to play. I think that's going to add a huge weapon to the offense. He'll probably have the best wide receivers that he's had as a trio. So I think that he's going to definitely have the weapons this year, and so I would be more positive about him, both as a redraft and as a dynasty player.
The things that concerns me is the running back. I want to see them address that position. Isaiah Pacheco can't do it on his own. He was lucky to get through the 1 year he did, and you know what I mean. And then it took its toll on him this year. You could see he wasn't right from the get go. And if the defense remains top 5. If they have some bad luck like the Lions had, they have some guys go down, then you could see the games getting shootout. But going in, if their defense remains top 5, I just don't see Mahomes, taking the downfield shots that he need that that he can do. It's not like he can't take downfield shots, but it's just how the team is built for me. But dynasty wise, there's going to be another year between now and the next 4 or 5 years where he's going to have that 40, 45 touchdowns, 48 touchdown season, and everybody's going to go, whoa, there's the ceiling again. Mm-hmm. So I could see why you got him high in dynasty. He is the best quarterback in the NFL talent wise.
And so, as you could tell by Joe's accent, he's from the Boston area, and so
the greater Boston area. Guys like Andrew doesn't have that hard, but Andrew Cooper, he's from the South Shore of Massachusetts. Yeah. He talks. He's got the best voice for it. I'm just out here having a good time.
But you might just have just a little bit of bias against Patrick Mahomes being a better quarterback than Tom Brady.
No, I actually I really like. I'll argue Joe Burrow's right there with.
I think Mahomes. Burrow is fantastic. Yeah, absolutely.
But I wanted to ask you. There's a guy missing from that list, Bo Nix. How do you feel about him after year 1?
Yeah, actually, in my latest update, he is actually 11 over.
Is he?
And I moved Jordan Love out because I've got concerns about if the Packers offense is going to be really run heavy, similar to the way that they were in the second half of 2024. If that continues, Jordan Love's just not going to be able to produce. And adjusting expectations on Bo Nix a little bit. I've gone through a weird journey with Bo Nix where I was higher than market on him prior to rookie drafts and dynasty. And then as he was playing extremely well, I found myself starting to fall behind market because I kind of always looked at Bo Nix as someone who's going to have success immediately, but I wasn't sure if there was ever going to be greater than that success for him. Like I thought he might be a player who's going to hit his ceiling very early in the NFL because was mostly already a finished product coming into the NFL, playing so much in college. But really looking at that season again and looking at how much he produced with very little weaponry around him was starting to shift my perspective a little bit, which is why I did make that change to put him into my top 12. I do think that he's going to be a top 12 QB in 2025. I don't know if it's like a low end QB 12, like QB1, and that's his ceiling. Right. Even though that rookie year was so good, I don't know how much more he progresses, but still, I had to give credit to the season he had and think that he really is probably going to be a top 12 QB again. So I have to make sure I have him in there for dynasty because he is young, and if I expect him to do that now, I would expect him to continue that in the future. But I still look at the other QBs around him and think there's the QBs I have ahead of him as having a higher potential ceiling than he does over the long haul.
Okay, well, let's jump to running back then. And, Bijan, Gibbs, Barkley, Hall, that seems to be, a pretty, a popular grouping at the top. And then Chain, I'm sorry, is then the fifth running back. The one running back that I looked at, I've been a James Cook fan and James Cook owner for the last 2 years, but I'm also a little leery, especially with this past season. A lot of his scoring came off of touchdowns, and will he be able to continue that, high percentage of, or at least high number of touchdowns? Also with Ray Davis, also available to the team. I'm kind of thinking, well, what are your thoughts on James Cook?
So I've actually been a James Cook hater for most of his career. The way he was used in college, the way he was used when he started in the NFL, he just wasn't getting the workload that we really wanted. And while he was pretty efficient with the touches he was getting, he wasn't getting anything near the goal line. But that completely changed this year. Joe Brady made a concerted effort that he was their goal line back.
Involve him,
and that's why I felt comfortable having him up my rankings, and to a point now where I'm actually just basically even with the market, is because it wasn't really fluky last year. Like, scoring that many touchdowns in itself is fluky to an extent, right? Because not that many people score that many touchdowns on the amount of touches that James Cook got. That was an inflated touchdown percentage, no doubt about it. But that's just because he converted a lot of the opportunities he got. He was getting the opportunities, which is what the important thing is. He can regress from that touchdown percentage he had last year and still be very good. Maybe just not convert quite as many of those opportunities, and be more in line with the average running back, and that's completely fine because we saw that shift in the usage that really mattered.
Seems like a sell high candidate. I mean, would you take a 201, 202 for him?
I would not take. It would have to be mid first, for me to sell James Cook.
That high, huh? Are we talking Superflex? Are we talking Superflex?
Yeah, Superflex, mid first.
Wow.
I don't think this class is that great, if I'm being honest. That's part of that reason. Last year would probably be 110, 111, and I would have moved off James Cook because I felt really good about those wide receivers at the end of the first.
Right.
Whereas this year, I don't feel quite as great about that back half of the first round of rookie drafts. So yeah, it would have to be a fairly high pick.
Yeah, that makes sense. He is still in a very good situation and going to get the volume. That's what kind of I made sure I got him in Scott Fish. He was one of my Scott Fish targets last year.
It's also whenever you're trading a player just straight up for a pick, you're taking on all the risk of that trade.
Yeah,
anytime I'm trading away a top player like that, I tend to almost never do it just for a single pick for that reason. If I'm trading with James Cook, it would be to tier down to another player and get a pick on top of it.
And get a pick.
And Christian McCaffrey, of course, had the he in fact, I think in a lot of the Scott Fishbowl drafts, he was drafted 1, 2, or 3.
Yeah.
And so, but he is at that age, I guess 27, 28. Am I right about there?
Yeah, I think he's going to be 28. I think 28 sounds right.
Yeah, and then coming back from a significant injury.
He is 28. He'll be turning 29.
Wow. Okay. So, thoughts on CMC's place in the rankings and your expectations going forward?
Yeah, it's basically just a concession to the fact that he could still just be CMC. Even after this year, he says he's feeling good. The last thing we got from him was saying that he was feeling good. Of course, he's going to say that, but that's all it is. It's like, if he comes back and he's anywhere close to the CMC we know, we would look like fools for not be drafting him highly and having him high in our ranks. Could he be done? Absolutely. There's a real world where he comes back, doesn't look anything like himself, gets injured again, and we're never really talking about CMC again. But knowing that the ceiling is the best player in fantasy, proven best player in fantasy, I have to give some credit to that, and that's why he's still top 10 for me.
And one last running back. Oh, go ahead, Joe.
You want to do? I got one more question if you want me. I was going to ask him. Let's just pretend Genty lands on the Cowboys. Where would you have him slotted in on here? In that scenario, dynasty ranking.
I know you don't have running back 7 ahead of knocking down Kyron.
Okay,
but still behind Jonathan Taylor. Okay. I think Genty is a fantastic prospect. I think he's very, very good. I'm just saying he, playing it where he didn't always play top competition.
I agree.
There's a little bit something to that. Still, like that is the only way I could knock Genty, just because he is a absolutely fantastic prospect. I just think there's some really good running backs still left, and I would be really hard pressed to put him above Jonathan Taylor, Achane.
He's the only one I'm asking about, because I don't see any of the. I mean, unless the other ones get a really, really good landing spot, I don't see any other rookie cracking that top 12.
We'd have to get a little bit of a surprise draft capital like Jahmyr Gibbs, where no one was expecting him to go as high as he did. Like if Trevion Henderson goes pick 14 or something like that. Well, I think 14 is the Colts, so not 14. But I mean, something like that where it's a little bit surprising. And it's a really good landing spot. There's a good chance that Henderson makes it into my top 12 too, because I really like Henderson. He's easily my RB2 in the class. So that could happen, but unless we get a surprise situation like that, I don't think anybody else will be in my top 12. Okay, not to start the year.
Let's move to then wide receiver. And the top three seem to be pretty popular with rankings. Maybe Puka Nacua might be a little high. I want to talk a little bit about, and by the way, I'm the biggest Puka Nacua fan. I drafted him. I have him on 8 teams. Love the player, but it just seems with not only his injury, as well as the questions around Stafford, is that perhaps a little bit on the high side. So why don't you tell us your the reasoning behind Nacua at 4?
Well, I'll be honest, I kind of go back and forth every single day on where I want to put Puka, because I kind of want to have Neighbors ahead of him now a little bit, because I think I'm almost at the point of drafting Neighbors ahead of Puka. Because if Matthew Stafford leaves the Rams, even if he doesn't go to the Giants, I think at that point I might put Neighbors over Puka. And so since you kind of have to be ahead of the market, I might just make the move anyways. But Puka is just fantastic. And when he came back, he was nearing what Jamar Chase was doing while he was playing. So I don't think there's any doubt about who Puka Nacua is and how dominant he can be in that McVay offense. The only question I think you can have with Puka at this point is if he has Matthew Stafford or not, and how long he has Matthew Stafford for. Because if Matthew Stafford plays for the Rams this year, is he playing for them in 2026? I don't know. So their succession plan, doesn't feel very good. Still, the Giants don't have a plan at all currently. So that sucks. But Malik Neighbors was absolutely fantastic as a rookie.
He was.
And there's no knocks that can be made on what Neighbors did. The only thing that's holding him back is his quarterback play. And Lamb, I mean, those three, Lamb, Puka, Neighbors, I would say are approximately equal to me. And having them in any order I would say anybody was wrong. Lamb is just basically what we want Puka and Neighbors to do. Lamb has done for a full season, So he's kind of got that in his bag. And his situation is the most stable of the three. Dak coming back. And doesn't seem like those two are going anywhere. So I like that. The straight up rankings, I think, are frustrating for that reason, just straight linear rankings, because depending on team, situation, your dynasty, all those things, it's more fluid than that. I won't always take Lamb over Nacua. I won't always take Nacua over Neighbors. It depends, Those three are approximately equal to each other for me.
Nice.
Joe?
Do you see anybody on this list that you would consider selling?
So I'm usually trying to always get elite wide receivers. I think that's like
right. I mean,
is-
most of these guys you're not, but I mean,
Yeah.
I see one that I think I would shop.
Let's hear yours. I want to hear yours.
I would say AJ Brown.
Okay, talk to me.
Just because he's about 20, he's going on. I think he is 29, or if he's 28, 29, he's got to be getting up there. He's still got great value. He's going to produce. It's not like you're giving away crap. So I would go. I would take a first round pick for him. If I thought I needed to get a little younger in overall for the overall build.
For me, I would probably need the 101 to move off of AJ Brown.
That high, huh?
Well, just thinking, I think the only rookie in the draft that I would rank ahead of AJ Brown if I was doing a startup would be Genty. I think I would still have Ted McMillan behind him. I wouldn't have any of the QBs ahead of AJ Brown. So
I mean, we don't have landing spots yet either, so it's hard to.
It's true.
Yeah.
But like, I don't really care where the QBs go. They won't be ahead of
him
for me, just because I don't think it's that. Like I said, I don't think it's a very good class. Ted McMillan, I'm excited for, but he has his warts too, and now his draft capital is somewhat in question. Like mock drafts are starting to show him dropping down into like the teens, whereas before he looked like he was going to be a top 10 pick. So I think there's plenty of other rookie drafts where I wouldn't say I had to be the 101 for AJ Brown, but I still have a lot of faith for AJ Brown.
There's nothing that suggests that he's not going to be
this is enlightening. I've only been playing Dynasty for 3 years, and out of 25 years fantasy football, just 3 years Dynasty. So this is insightful for me. I'm still learning. Like I learned, there were two things I learned tonight already that you pointed out. So this is good. Yeah, this is progress for me.
Okay, now tight end.
Yeah.
And of course, Brock Bowers just stole the world with even with the Raiders, and McBride being high up there. And I'm guessing, again, there's, the people are going to be looking at Mark Andrews perhaps and saying, gee, do the Ravens move on from him? They've got a solid backup behind him, and again, some people will only make their decision based on one catch or missed catch. And so give us your thoughts on Mark Andrews and where you see him playing next year.
Well, he's definitely not in his prime anymore, but I still think he's playing well. But if you do look at his season, completely reliant on touchdowns. That anybody who scores 11 touchdowns, most of their season is going to be based on those touchdowns. But like Mark Andrews, he really was not getting the kind of volume that we're used to him getting, and that's a problem. I don't know that the Ravens move on from him. I think that's still kind of up in the air if that's something they're really going to do or not. But either way, like I think that we're going to see more Isaiah Likely next year.
Sure will, yeah.
I still think like Mark Andrews is going to be an important part of the offense. Like I just think like that workload is coming down a little bit. So I have him where I have him still currently because I actually lean towards him staying on Baltimore. I don't know why they would, just because they're trying to play for a Super Bowl. I imagine they want to keep the talent on their team, and Mark Andrews is a big part of what they do. And as long as he's on that offense, I expect him to score touchdowns at a pretty high rate. For just being honest, like, yeah, that touchdown rate he had last year is pretty inflated, but that's kind of what happens when you have a really good QB on a really good offense with a really good offensive system. Like, people are going to score a lot of touchdowns. So I still have some faith in what he's going to do in 2025. But if we're being honest, that is probably the name on this list that I'm most likely to like trade away if I have them. Trying to move down to like a Jonnu Smith and getting a player or a pick on top, just because Jonnu Smith could easily score more than Mark Andrews in 2025. Like, I don't know that what he did in 2024 was a fluke for the Dolphins. It seems a lot like the Dolphins unlocked something in their offense that they didn't have prior, as a way to combat them not having the best offensive line. I don't know if they can fix their offensive line in one season. And it seems like, McDaniels found the best way to utilize Jonnu Smith. It's no real surprise because he's always been a player who's really good after the catch. It's just this is the first coaching staff that featured him in that way.
And I know I want to jump one more rookie question in there, just because Tyler Warren has been a name that maybe not to the Bowers level, but he's certainly being talked about in the levels of the McBrides and Laporta.
He's versatile. He's versatile, so he'll be part of NFL offenses for sure.
I struggle with Warren because just looking at his collegiate profile, he has the 1 year production, and it was a really good year. Don't get me wrong, but he's 1 year production. And if the argument is because he was playing behind the other tight ends that are there for Penn State, I'm not sure that's the best argument because it's not like those other tight ends were anything awesome or anything great. So I realize that can sometimes just be explained by like that's the coaching staff's decision. Sometimes that's just the way it works in colleges. Those older players get the opportunity first compared to the younger players. Like that just happens sometimes. Unfortunately, that can be the case. I think it's pretty dumb, right? Like most coaches, I would think you'd want to just put your best players on the field at all times, but anyways, I digress. So, but you look at like all film, everybody with their mock drafts, like everything is glowing for Warren. And I don't know where to settle because I just like, I would like to see more from him in college than we saw if he's such a highly thought of prospect. I'm kind of just giving credit to the fact that everybody who watches the film says he's really, really good. All the big prognosticators are saying, top half of the first round for Tyler Warren. So I'm probably going to be about around consensus, whatever that is, when rookie drafts come around, whatever the consensus kind of says is his value. I'm probably just going to stay around that. I don't know how much I'll actually have, but I'm going to try and make sure I get at least a little bit, just in case he really is as good as everyone says he is.
And I know we're running close to the end, but I want to make sure to get some thoughts from you in terms of how you build these rankings and your process involved. If you could give us advice on how we could do, rankings of our own.
Sure. So, like I said, everything I do is based off of the projections I do to start, which, a top-down approach, I look at the team's tendencies first. Like I keep a spreadsheet of just like play counts, play percentages, all that kind of run percentage, pass, all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
So I can start with the top-down percent. Look at a team of how many plays are they going to run, how often are they going to pass, and then go to QB and down to the skill position players and whatnot.
Implement all the percentages and stuff like volume percentages. Yeah.
Build all those out. I would say that most people who do projections probably start out in a similar place, and then your subjective analysis comes in after that to really work on who's going to be getting this amount of a market share and that. But going from there is kind of what feeds into the rankings. It spits out who scores the most points, but it's not always that simple because like a running back who's a 1B in an offense or something will project better than the best handcuff in the league, but I might draft the best handcuff in the league ahead of that running back who's the 1B, knowing that the handcuff can have a higher ceiling, right? So
the upside, yep.
Yeah, so then after those projections come out, it's a matter of going through them and seeing where players need to come up or down based on projectable outcomes. Some players are just 4 plays. We know that. Like an Adam Thielen, he's probably going to score some points, but what's the ceiling really? I don't know. There's some players who are highly volatile, and you have to bake in how much you think how likely you think they are to hit a high end outcome for their range. The type of ranges of outcomes that players have is really important to try and figure that out and work that into your rankings. Like the reason why we tend to rank even though players hardly ever repeat as the top player at their position year over year, we normally rank that player who was the previous top one at the top position because they're the most likely to be in that top 5 range, right? And knowing that players like that have a small range near the top is really important, and trying to figure that out for all the different players as you go through your rankings and adjust accordingly. And when that's basically redraft, half PPR, full PPR, standard. Obviously, there's some differences based on archetypes of players. Pass catching backs are obviously better in PPR leagues, even if they don't run the ball that much. Wide receivers who are really just down the field threats, score touchdowns, but not that many catches. Obviously they're better in half PPR than they are standard than they are in full PPR, things like that. But really, rankings, I think, get the biggest change, not from scoring systems necessarily, but from league types, where if it's the difference between a 2 wide receiver league and 3 wide receiver league is drastic. And it really changes the math on how early you should draft the wide receivers and how many you should draft early. Stuff like that, I think, actually affects rankings more than anything. And then taking those over to Dynasty, it becomes adding in the age factor into your rankings. And really, for me, it's always trying to project out 3 years. It would be nice to be able to have a player like Patrick Mahomes and know he's on your roster for 10 years. If your league lasts 10 years, not all leagues do. Some leagues fold. That's just part of the game. And also, it's really hard to say that you're going to know what a situation is more than 3 years out. It's just the way football is. There's a lot of change that happens. So I never try to get too ahead of myself with any of my rankings. It's really just saying, in this 3-year window, who do I think is the best bet at these positions? And even position to position, that can change a little bit. The running back position is probably the one that is as close to my redraft rankings as it is, my dynasty rankings, just because running backs shelf life is as short as any position.
I was going to say it's down to about 2 years now. So you're probably
really like players like Derrick Henry. How long is he going to be playing? I don't know, but he's just outside my top 12 running back rankings because he's going to be really good this year. I'm expecting him to be really good, and because I can only count on running backs to be really good for a couple years at a time, anyways. Derrick Henry's going to be up there, even though despite him being super old. But like wide receiver, it's completely different because wide receivers tend to be really good for a really long period of time. So you can actually project out 3 years and say,
does contract or the type of contract or the length of the contract, does that factor into any of your rankings?
Only in occasions where I think the player is specifically benefiting from their situation and they wouldn't perform at that level if they weren't. Like elite players, contract, whatever. Like talent finds a way. Players who are depth pieces who are able to produce because, like Jerome Ford, we brought him up earlier. I think he's a good running back. Is he like a top 20 running back in the NFL? No, I don't think I don't think so. So he's benefiting from his current situation. If he was a free agent, I would not have him ranked as highly. Because I don't know what a team would sign him to do. On the Browns, I know he has a role.
Yeah, it's funny. Chuba Hubbard was a running back who people were running away from because, of course, they drafted a stud running back. Now that stud running back's got another full season out, and so I suspect everyone's rushing to, try to grab back Chuba Hubbard. And he's still young too. I think he's only like 25 or so. So I mean, he's
If you bought into Chuba when they drafted Jonathan Brooks, you look extremely smart, and you really got paid out for that investment.
Well,
probably got him to next to nothing too.
Yeah, I'm sure he was getting traded for a 3rd round rookie picks pretty easily.
People would dump trying to trade to get so that either that or they cut him and you get lucky and pick them up.
I'm sure there were some dynasty leagues that aren't quite as deep where
I got Kyron Williams like that at the beginning of last year. Somebody had to dump him because the roster cut down, and I took over an orphan. I was like, I need that guy. I picked him up, and he turned out to work out. He worked out good.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, we want to thank you for coming on, Wyatt. It was
I appreciate you for having me.
You want to tell the people where they can find your work? One more time.
You can find me on Twitter at WyattB_FF. You can find almost all of my content at JWB Fantasy Football. That's on Twitter at JWB_FF or YouTube. Also, the website, jwbfantasyfootball.com. You can get our rankings there and sign up for stuff. Find our Patreon as well through all that. And then you can check my writing on Dynasty League Football.
Awesome. Join Rick and I next Thursday at our regular time when our guest will be John Siegel from @FantasyGoats. John and I have been in the same Dynasty League. It was actually my first Dynasty startup draft for 3 years. So definitely looking forward to chatting him up and having a good hour fantasy football talk with him.
You should work a trade while you're on air.
Right? This is a good idea. I'm gonna take a look at
Put him on the spot.
Yeah. Nice. Also, keep an eye out for more great shows on the Sports Affiliation YouTube channel. On Sundays, we have TSA Hoops Show with JR. Tuesdays, the Give Back Show with Rick. Awesome show. Kala's great interview show, The Game Changes, is on Wednesday nights. And also starting up this week, this upcoming Monday, is our first mock draft with Will, JC, BFN, Pete, and then Rick and myself will be participating in this one, I believe. And yeah, I'll be definitely. I'm not a big fan of mock drafts unless I know it's being taken seriously, and people are trying to get a good thing out of it. So I know that's going to be the case here. So I'm really looking forward to that one, to participating and sharing draft thoughts. Looking forward to that. But that's about it. Thanks again, Wyatt. JC, you want to take us out, man?